Hello, everyone. This is Alicia Zari, and we are back for Chapter 6 of Teaching to Empower. This chapter is called The Skills of Collaboration. So some key topics we're going to talk about in this video are the central importance of communication, the language and skills of cooperation, and how to help students embrace the complexities of group work. When we think of collaboration or teamwork, a lot of words come to mind. Cooperation, collaboration, team, coordination, and a lot of times we use these words simultaneously, but they have different nuances in what they each bring to the table. And a lot of it has to do with sort of what people are contributing and whether it's going to a shared goal or shared vision or a new idea versus just an existing idea. For today's purpose, we're going to use the definition that a classroom community collaboration is a classroom community effort in which no fewer than 2 and no more than 6 students are grouped to work together to complete a group goal, share ideas, and help each other with answers to questions, share materials, and divide labor where appropriate. So that 2 to 6 students working together is going to be our definition for today. When we think of collaboration, the first thing that comes to mind is really the communication skills it requires. Just like this wheel image, communication is the linchpin that holds it all together. But communication is something that we model, we teach, and we practice. It's not something that students just automatically are skilled at. So a lot of our efforts in collaboration actually come down to the skill level of how we listen to people and how we respond to people. In the book Effortless, Making It Easier to Do What Matters Most, the author talks about, more in the context of relationships, but this really transfers to working with students as well, is the idea of listening and responding as a tennis match. Say, for example, the first person serves the ball or serves the topic. The weather is really nice today. The person receiving it could turn towards that person and say, I agree. It is a really pleasant day. I love it when it's 70 degrees out. And in that scenario, they've been served the ball and they serve it right back, making it easy to keep the conversation going. Or the person can say, the weather is nice today. And the other person receives and hears that message, but actually turns against, goes, I disagree. It's way too hot. I actually prefer when it's in the mid-60s. Both agreeing and turning towards and respectfully disagreeing and turning against are actually healthy for relationships and communication. But too often, the third scenario happens. It's really nice. The weather is really nice today. Instead of listening and responding to that topic, the person derails and responds with a totally different topic. So, where are we going to go eat tomorrow? And too often, what happens is that's like the ball being served back, but going straight into the net. The person who served the ball has to go muster the energy to pick that ball up, decide whether to start on that new topic or respond back. In those scenarios, people don't see each other. They don't respond to each other. And so our goal, whether it's agreeing or disagreeing, is really those first 2 scenarios in teaching students. Similarly, if you know anything about improv and innovation, instead of being confined to yes, but, and having limitations, a common practice is yes, and. As someone contributes something to the table, instead of turning it down or coming up with the constraints, being creative is sometimes that yes, and. Yes, and we might do this, and this, and that. And that's where the brainstorming and the collaboration and the creativity come from. While these are fun to play in contexts like improv games, which I strongly suggest playing. When you have teams, let them play first, let them get to know each other. It really helps to also model talk structures for listening and for responding. One that I used to use with my students pretty frequently was in the context of book clubs. Book clubs are a collaborative discussion. And we would use these red and yellow chips to symbolize when we would be that yes and versus starting a new conversation. So, say the first person contributes a question, and that would be our yellow, starting a conversation. And then we would see how long we could go with each person that added a response related to that topic with red. And then when it kind of fizzled out and died out, someone would create a new question or a new direction for us to go. And that would be a new yellow, followed by a series of reds. What we didn't want to happen was not a conversation, but an interrogation. I ask you a question, you answer a response. I ask you a question, you answer a response. And visualizing the yellow, red, yellow, red, yellow, red showed students that we're not interrogating each other as a team. We're trying to be responding and extending the conversation. So visualizing the talk structure using these chips was really helpful. And you'll probably find these in your classroom already. Similarly, many of you might be familiar with the Kagan structures for collaborative learning. One of my favorites using those same red and yellow chips was the talking chips rule. This spend a buck is another name for it, or talking chips is an activity where you give, it's meant around equity of voice. So each person gets the same amount. Say everybody got 4 chips to start with. And anytime you contribute, either by answering a question, giving an idea, responding, you spend a buck. You put your chip in the middle. 2 things typically happen with this. The person who talks a lot ends up spending all of their chips really early. And when they really want to say something, they have to be silenced because they've talked too much already. The adverse can also work. The quiet person that's been listening the whole time gets stuck at the end with a bunch of chips, and now they have to find a way to keep contributing. So it allows both ends, sort of our step up, step back norm. It allows both ends of the spectrum, the super quiet or the super outgoing, to work together on their goals for equity of voice. Similarly, when we do collaborative activities, it's important to help students learn how to resolve conflicts themselves. I most likely shared this puzzle analogy with you, an activity I always did with my students on the first week of school. Each person got a puzzle piece, and they, as a team, had to work together to find out how to make the puzzle. Some of them knew the end goal and what the puzzle created. It was my classroom number, which you'll see in just possibly a second. And others didn't know what it was going to come to. And every single year, they would get to a point where conflicts would arise. And the more years I taught, the more I chose to sit back and observe rather than jump in and rescue for them. And when you do teach students to reflect and try to resolve their own conflicts, coming up with solutions to their problems, creating suggestions, they see that they're capable of resolving conflicts. And typically they'll resolve conflicts on their own, whether an adult's there or not. They do this all the time at recess. Siblings do this when parents aren't available. We want them to be self-directed and be able to have empathy and problem solve. So trying not to rescue too early. Just like we've talked about helicopter parents trying to hover and monitor and jump in with the student's every need, we similarly have heard this phrase, and is very common now, the snowplow parents, the ones who pave the way to make it easier for their children to get through. And what happens is children might be able to have some support then, but what happens when they do face that challenge and they've never had practice and they've never had modeling because the parents or the adults in the room have always solved it for them? Some similar lessons is with conflict resolution are teaching students how to use I statements to express and communicate what they need. I feel angry when you ignore me because it hurts my feelings. Next time, please listen to me. We used to use, in primary, we used to have a fly swatter, and it was a symbol for bugs, and we had another wand for wishes. Bugs and wishes was an activity in our morning circle community meetings. It bugs me when you do this. I wish you would. And giving students sentence frames to be able to have that language to communicate. You may or may not be able to access a curriculum around conflict resolution or social emotional learning. In my district, Sunnyvale School District, many of our schools have adopted the Second Step program. And in the fourth grade curriculum that I taught, it started with empathy and really had videos and scenarios to learn that. And then it talked about self-regulation and how to calm down, as well as the problem-solving steps. And each week, out of context, being able to model and have these discussions, students, when the problem arose in conflict, they were able to go, oh, I need to stop, name my feeling, and calm down, like we learned in Second Step. Overall, there are a lot of different things to teach. The complexities of collaboration and group work. There are so many different skills that can be taught, modeled, discussed, so that when students are faced with having to navigate all of these, they've had some practice. And lastly, helping students embrace group work. The key skills that have showed to be successful: repeated guided instruction about collaboration, models of collaborative communication, calling it out, showing what it is, relating it to literature, relating it to videos, encouragement and support to engage in collaborative behaviors, and lastly, a lot of opportunities for reflection and revision. When we do this, our students can see that they are capable of working with a team. Whether that's their comfort zone or not, they're going to be asked to work collaboratively in many of the different settings of life, whether that's work or home or play. And so teaching them the skills is really important for collaboration. That's it for today. And next week or next video, we will talk about Chapter 7, Self-Advocacy.